Welcome, everybody. Thank you for braving the cold. This is going to be a very exciting evening. I'm Perry Bard. I would like to introduce our performers tonight. Kathy Brew, sitting in the middle, is an award-winning video maker who works in both documentary and in experimental film. She also has worked as a curator programmer for the Margaret Mead Film Festival that happens annually, also for Real New York, and for Lincoln Center's New York Video Festival. She teaches in the MA Computer Art Department at SVA, and her colleague is Joseph Nechvatal, sitting to her left. And Joseph's artistic research with viral form has led him further into research in the field of viral artificial life. He's worked in collaboration with the programmer Stephane Sikora, and he is the author of Towards an Immersive Intelligence, Essays on the Work of Art in the Age of Computer Technology and Virtual Reality, 1993 to 2006. Rhys Chatham, who is sitting to Kathy's right.
Left.
Kathy's
left.
Left? Okay. Is a composer, guitarist, and trumpet player, and primarily active in avant-garde and minimalist music, but recently a 200-guitar version of A Crimson Grail was performed at the Lincoln Center Out of Doors Festival and released on the Nonsuch label. Tonight, we are going to be immersed in Viral Ventures, which includes paintings of human retinas and anuses under attack by an artificial life computer virus. It is accompanied by Rhys Chatham's score, which consists of his 2005 composition for 400 electric guitars. At this point, I think that the three people on stage will have a conversation introducing you to the work.
Well, we're just going to chat, and then the work is going to speak for itself. And then we'll come back after looking at the work and have more of a conversation with all of you about it. But I thought we'd start out by having Joseph and Rhys talk about their collaboration, because I see that you two have had some history in collaborating. And in fact, back in the mid-'80s, you collaborated on a piece called XS, the opera opus, that was in the mid-'80s. And I'm wondering if you could both talk about that collaboration as a precursor to this and perhaps others.
Yeah, we presented it in its final phase in 1986 in Boston at the Shakespeare Theater in a rather large format. And we worked our way up to that by performing it in small clubs like the Pyramid Club, 8BC, the Mud Club, things like that. So it sort of developed out of a small club atmosphere. And then we sort of expanded it into including dance. We had a choreographer, Yves Moussard, and Rhys developed the music into different aspects. And it was kind of working with the imagery of this overlapping Pamel-Pest type imagery I was particularly working with at the time that, for me, sort of represented the chaos of nuclear destruction. And that became sort of a theme for the opera, XS. Rhys?
I agree with everything that you've said up to this point. And Joseph and I started working together in the 80s. We met, I think punk was very big, at that point. But it wasn't, punk was a bit earlier. It had evolved into new wave, and then there was no wave. And all of us were very involved in that scene. but I think both of us were coming out of a tradition where visual artists would collaborate with musicians. And I myself had studied with Morton Subotnick, who was very, at NYU, was very big on collaboration. At the time, I think, you know, in the 80s, when did we first meet? Was it in 1984 or
Yeah, it would
like
have
this?
been 83. I remember how we met. One might assume we met through Lamont Young because we were both,
exactly.
but actually we didn't. We met at the Mud Club, and you had just seen an exhibition I had done at Semi-4 Gallery, and you responded to the imagery. Again, it was a kind of complex, layered, noise vision type thing that corresponded, I think, in your mind, with the sort of excessive overloading of the guitar work that you were doing at that time. And you felt a certain camaraderie, I guess. And you're right, it was very much in a sort of a post-punk, apocalyptic atmosphere. And I remember meeting then, and then we spoke, and then little by little, this project developed.
You know, but at the time, I'm sure it's the same now, but back then there was really this thing of visual artists living with musicians, living with choreographers, especially in Soho, in Manhattan, in the late 60s and early 70s. We all lived within a 20-block radius of each other, you know, and so you get up in the morning and there would be Philip Glass and Richard Serra talking about an Yvonne Rainer performance that they saw the day after. It was really incredible. This is before internet.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
You
This was all analog. This is before we
Yeah,
got into the digital realm.
I mean, we really needed to have a 20-block radius where society could go to dream, and that's what we were all doing there. We were dreaming, and but that wasn't our generation. You know, Yvonne and Richard and Philip were a little bit older than we were.
Right.
But the reference to Lamont Young, because I noticed that in reading both of your backgrounds a little bit more than what I already knew, and you both had that linkage. Can you say something about that? I mean,
Yeah, very, very quickly, it was like a great job that I had when I first came to New York in '75, working for the Dia Art Foundation as Lamont Young's archivist, and I cataloged his Fluxus art collection, and then his scores, and then his tapes, and so I had sort of this immersion in a kind of Fluxus attitude, although of course Lamont had moved on beyond that, and very much caught up in that, you know, downtown avant-garde environment.
interdisciplinary also.
Interdisciplinary.
And what
Yeah,
about you,
and I
Rhys?
sang in Lamont's group in the early 70s. It was the group right after John Cale was in the group. John Hassel was in it, you know, at that time, and Terry Riley would come in to sing with it. And so we kind of knew each other, you know, from that. And, you know, and once again, you know, in, I think, what was it, 83 or 84? You know, we were still all going to Puffy's. And what was the name of that other bar?
Magoo's.
Magoo's, yeah. And the thing about Magoo's, it was great. Like, if you didn't have the money to pay, you could give them a painting. And it would pay for your drinks for a month. And so there were lots of paintings in this bar. And it was a really, really nice scene.
But what about, what was the nature of your collaboration? How did you come together from the visual and the music, and how did that work in terms of riffing off of?
This time or
Well,
the
let's
first time?
the precursor, and then I think what would be interesting to talk about how it's been different now in the digital realm.
But I just have to say, you know, that I saw Joseph's work, and at the time he was working with drawings and working with graphite. And you saw these images, and there were layers upon layers upon layers. And somehow it was a story, but it was your story. I mean, you could read whatever you wanted into it. And I felt a kind of lien, a kind of link. Because when you listen to my work with guitar trio or a singer, that thing, you're hearing these overtones, and it tells a story, but somehow it's your story. And so I felt this link, and I felt, this is someone that I could possibly work with.
So, okay, let's fast forward, and then we'll really get into it more after we see the work, but a little bit about this current collaboration, Viral Venture, that we're going to see.
Okay, it started from the last series of work I was doing, which came from a new book that I've written, not the book that's here, but a new one that's being released this year called Immersion into Noise. It's being published by University of Michigan. And from that I began working with the image of the retina, the human retina, and sort of applying noise principles to the eye. At the same time, I reconnected with Rhys in Paris. He just happened to give me one of the latest things he had done, Crimson Grail. And I started to work with the computer virus program on the eye. So I had this sort of movement going, and I was just listening to the music for the pleasure of listening to it while I was working, and it just hit me. The correspondence, the vibration between the music and what I was seeing on the screen was imminent for me. I felt it in my body. I felt it. This is an analog experience, but it felt so synced. And then I called Rhys and I said, "You got to see something." And he took a look at it, and we agreed it was, an interesting combination of putting these things in one place.
A Crimson Grail was a piece written for 200 electric guitars that was originally premiered in the Sacré-Coeur, which is this cathedral-like space on a big hill in Paris, that is a symbol of the right wing in Paris. And it was the socialist government that asked me to do something in there. And I said, I can't do something in there. Everybody's going to come and want to paint the building red. And they said, we have to take it back, and so we did. We took it back. And we did a performance there from 7 in the evening till 7 in the morning. The negotiations with the Archbishop were absolutely difficult. He said, "Oh my God, it's too loud," and so the deal I made with him, I said, "Father, listen, we'll do music to pray to for a half an hour, and then you can pray for a half an hour," and like that. And so that's what we did. So we played the music for a half an hour, and the people could pray. I don't know how much praying they were doing. I think they might have been drinking beer. But that was the deal, and it worked out. And but the music was made on the streets of Paris. While I was making the music, I was like walking in a Le Marais district, and Joseph and I, we've been working. We've known each other for years and years, but we, had we were out of touch. But then he was living in Paris, and I was living in Paris. And then this piece was made in Paris, and Viral Venture was made in Paris. And so we hope, when you see the screening, that you'll get a little sense of Paris when you see it. No?
You won't.
Well, so maybe on that note, we'll come back and have more conversation about Viral Venture after people see it. How does that seem?
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph, you want to talk a little bit about the whole viral aspect of your
Yes.
image creation? Because I think people may not quite understand the whole emergent aspect of this work. This is not
Absolutely.
like a DVD that you just put in and it's the same every time.
Right. This is real-time artificial life. It's called. It's just a procedure of programming that tries to duplicate or replicate some of the laws of nature. So in this case, I tried to model the infection, which goes in and eats, as you could see, the color. It actually lives off the color of the paintings. And so the color creates an ecosystem for the artificial life to thrive, and then as it runs out of food, you saw it diminish. On the other hand, I flipped it this time, and sometimes you'd see it building the image out of nothing. So that was sort of a flip that a more recent development. So it's a kind of a creation out of destruction rather than merely destruction. But the whole viral project I've been working on for 20 years now sort of fascinated me. It came out of the AIDS crisis, of course, and then it became more and more relevant to computer viruses and now viral marketing. I never saw that one coming, but yeah.
What's viral marketing?
You should know.
I don't actually.
Viral marketing is a way that people market bottom up rather than top down. It's a way to get your information product circulating through the publicity channels without like mass media. It's micro media, I guess you'd call it.
It's like an infection that spreads.
Yeah, it spreads from computers, from person to person, computer to computer. But there's, the whole subject of the viral, it's very multifaceted, and it's, of course, a reflection on life and death, fundamentally. I mean, I take it pretty seriously about the artificial life part about it, and that's why I felt this work worked particularly well with Rhys's piece, because as he said earlier on, it was created for a basilica, and it had a kind of quasi-spiritual structure to it that I thought worked conceptually and sort of viscerally, at least for me, with the piece.
So again, back in terms of the collaboration, you were working with this. You got Rhys's music and just started, and then pulled him in and said,
Yeah.
"Don't these two go together?"
That's right. I had been creating my own audio in real time with the software, and as a matter of fact, one of the CDs that I'm selling here is the Viral Symphony, which I made through this noise, but it's much more abrasive and it's much more noisy. It's synchronated in that it was actually no longer multimedia, which is interesting. It was creating the audio and the visual simultaneously out of the same algorithm. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but it's much more aggressive and noisy, and I thought Rhys's piece particularly worked in the sort of vibrational realm with this work.
Yeah, but how is a viral symphony produced? Because actually, I did a show with Joseph at a gallery in Paris. What was that gallery's name?
Gallery Richard, and by the way, they're coming to New York. They're opening a gallery on 24th Street, I believe at 154 24th Street at the end of the spring. And so I'll be having a show there, and you'll be seeing a lot of other artists. A lot of them are European, but not all. And so it's something to keep your eye on for the future.
Because in addition to playing guitar, I also play trumpet. And so we thought it would be nice for this exhibition that Joseph had, where we were having a live video projection of things viral. We also actually had the Viral Symphony, and incorporated to the things we were doing. But there was a direct correlation,
Yes.
I think. you know, you see all these white spots on the image, and what they're actually doing is eating up the image.
That's right. That's right.
And I think that's what was going on with the music also.
Yeah, in the music, the host of the viral hack, visually, of course, is the image, is the painting, and the host for the audio aspect was a little audio loop, that very short 2-3 second loop that's put in the program to serve as a kind of host, and it just is worked in sort of unpredictable, emergent ways. I mean, this is emergence. I think Kathy sort of approached that. This is art which looks for complexity, so you actually make rules where something can emerge out of a very simple, well, not simple, but a set of rules.
Right, but if we were to do this another evening, we would see something different than what we saw tonight.
Yes.
No, every time, you know, we, you know, the program is initiated, we see something different, so it looks different every time, right?
Yes.
I was going to ask, where has this been shown publicly besides in this situation here tonight? Or?
The only other public thing, I did make a DVD where I captured all this and put Rhys's music on it, and I showed that at a place here called White Space, White Bar.
White Box.
What's it
White
called?
Box.
White Box. Last spring, to a moderately small audience, I think about 40 people or something like that. But this is
so. Is it a projection?
Yes, a projection.
That people could, instead of proscenium and sitting down, people were more like an installation moving through the space.
No, it was more like a bar with tables and like a cabaret, and people sat around the tables with their drinks.
Because to me, this we were talking earlier because of Rhys's other hat when he's also curated other artists' work, and there's a resonance to me in some ways with Marianne Amichet's work with this, but in the idea of being in a more spatialized space where, I mean, we lost some people, but I mean, it was great sitting here and being mesmerized, but I could also see this being in an environment that you moved around in, and
it's a wonderfully adaptive medium, the digital, because you could make this into an immersive environment. You could make it into a performance. All of these things I've sketched out, and we have plans on the board for this, and of course it all depends on the real world to take interest, but it's incredibly malleable medium. So yes. Rhys?
Yeah, I had a question. Like, who are the models? You know, for the live aspect of the visual.
You mean the retina and the anus?
Yeah.
Well, I tried using myself, but it was very difficult to get that photographic base to work from. So I went to medical archives on the internet.
And just out of curiosity, what inspired you in terms of those images?
Oh, absolutely.
As source material.
The book that I mentioned, Immersion into Noise, is about taking noise music and applying it to vision, painting, architecture, and then cognition. So I was interested in the eye, and I started to make the images using the retina. Then when I started to prepare my exhibition in Paris, I wanted to use another input-output valve on the human body, and I realized the highest was the eye and the lowest was the anus. And I said, why is the anus always ignored? I mean, it's very important. It's very important to me. I'm sure it's very important to everybody here. And so I decided I wanted to put the anus and the eye on the same level. And so I used a kind of structure to equalize them, and that's how it came about.
They're very mandala-like, actually. I mean, there is a very kind of a transformative spiritual sensibility that this work can evoke.
We were seeing. I had exactly the same sensation as I was looking at the image tonight. You know, like this kind of mandala, and my partner Isabel, was. After she saw the show that we did at the gallery in Paris, had dreams about it all night.
Is that nice? Yeah. I think spatially the imagery works on a very micro, like inner body aspect, but you can also view this imagery as sort of like satellite imagery. It's very much like a terrain, extra satellite, like huge distance or very narrow, very close distance.
You know, well, in the music, you know, it sort of takes us into an inner kind of place. Where I'm coming from, essentially, I'm a Kabbalist, practicing a very early traditional kind of Kabbalist meditation. And it's kind of comes out in the music I do. And in the images that we saw, there was a correlation, you know, with this beautiful, beautiful mandala that we saw that was constantly changing in the form of a circular image, you know, either the retina or the anus, that was making us focus on archetypes.
Yeah, archetypes, microscopic, cellular things. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the notion of cellular automata as it relates to this.
Exactly. That is the basis of my application of artificial life, is the automata, because again, you're making these kind of simple rules and letting the behavior emerge. So this is sort of a development out of that tradition. The cosmic and the micro, yeah, that is very important to me. I thought, like, I really wanted to connect the anus to the cosmos. I mean, I think that's an important idea, that we, you know, should be that connected to the universe and also that embedded in the material world. You know, so that macro thing, I think, is actually very important.
You know, in Kabbalist theory, we have this thing called the Tree of Life, and the first sphere is called Malkut, which corresponds on the human body with the anus. Nobody wants to spend time there. But, you know, everyone wants to go to the heart chakra, you know, or this chakra, et cetera, et cetera.
But
that's where you
there.
have to start. You have to start there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's very nice with this connection between the first chakra that we enter into the Tree of Life, you know, with the chakra of the sixth eye. Sixth chakra, pardon.
How about, do any of you have any questions for these two about their collaboration, the visual aspect, the sonic aspect? I think I had heard a question earlier about, I think we understood more about the music being emergent, and there was a question, I believe, about the sound and the music as well.
It has, I tried to explain it. I had been doing that, and it's a whole different experience, because yes, that same algorithm that drives the visuals can drive the audio, but it didn't have the same synchronicity. The end result is not the same, but yeah, I've done that before, and if you want to listen to it, I have a CD for sale over there, and you can also listen to it on the internet probably. But.
And just to plug on that note, yeah, Joseph's got a CD and a book over there, and Rhys has 2 CDs, one of which is either available on CD or on vinyl over there. So, and they're all $15 each. So when we conclude,
Yeah, and one of the CDs is not going to be available until April. So you can get it here now in this beautiful packaging, or you can download it, or you can download it for free on the internet.
Oh. Is this the same composition that you presented in 2005 as it was, or is this a looped version? The Joseph.
You know, I haven't listened to it for a long time. Joseph, is this
I can answer that.
Yes,
that is a live recording of the full concert he did. That is, actually, if you listen very carefully, you can hear there was a little applause at one point. You hear little things that indicate that's a live recording. That's a uncut, unmanipulated, full performance recording.
I was listening to it tonight, and I said, is that really what it sounded like? It sounded great. Now it's like so pleased.
How many of you in the audience had the opportunity to hear A Crimson Grail when it was at Lincoln Center out of doors back in 2009?
In this book, Immersion into Noise, that University of Michigan is releasing soon, this year for sure, I had to go back and look at that early work, and as I tried to sketch out like my theory of the function of noise in vision, not only in audio, musical. I mean, I start there because a lot of people are familiar with noise music now, and it has a strong tradition. But I wanted to apply that to vision and art, and then architecture. So I went back and I started looking at those drawings, and they became more and more relevant to my interests. And the very last software project I've done reinterprets that body of work. It's called the Palimpsest project. No, the Penelope project. And I wanted to take those early drawings that have now come back to me from museum collections and stuff in the form of JPEGs. So all of a sudden I have this new data bank of imagery to work from. And why Penelope? Because Penelope, if you remember, was waiting for Ulysses to come back, and she would weave and unweave a tapestry. So in this new software, I have one drawing sort of being eaten away at revealing the next, and another drawing under that. And so it's a sort of a continuous weaving, unweaving process. So I'm back into that body of work. It's a kind of a fold, you know. It's funny how life is.
Yes. But before you were doing it with graphite, and now you're doing it digitally?
Yeah, they've been digitized, and now I'm working with it as electronic media. But of course, now I can couple that with the actual drawings that I still have and make a kind of comparison between electronic and the graphite drawings. I'm kind of thinking of composing an exhibition with those two aspects simultaneously.
But you primarily work digitally now.
Yeah, I don't make drawings anymore like I used to. Structure of the piece that you're indicating is exactly that. It's repetition with difference. I mean, I got this idea from Gilles Deleuze, obviously, because it's the title of one of his most famous philosophical books. And I like that idea in relationship, again, to the cosmos and the body, to return and expand, return, expand, return, expand, always the same but different. The colors, again, a lot of that is chance operated because I use chance operation in the program, as I think you might know, randomizing the image database and randomizing the behaviors of the different virus attacks. So those two, it's kind of controlled chaos, as a matter of fact. It's chance and choice together.
Okay, this piece, A Crimson Grail, I mean, it was a site-specific work for a cathedral with a 15-second delay time. You know, that's why there are no drums in it. You know, because if you hit the snare drum, it just goes boom, and you hear it for 30 seconds. You know, so what I had to do. Most composers, they're trained to hear the music in their head, you know, and write it down. But then after the 80s, we had these things called computers and sequencers, and so we started working with those, and they were just great because you could hear the music. I'm just going to go back a little bit. You know, I had this wonderful opportunity to work with a band with a piece called Die Donnergötter, and you know, we developed it for 2 years, and I found out I was throwing out half the music, you know, because it didn't sound like I thought it would. And so I asked Phil Glass, you know, who's lived in the same building as me, Phil, do you have to throw out music too? And he said, I throw out at least half. And it was the same thing for him. And then we got sequencers, and then it was great because, you know, we could hear it on the computers. But then I was in a situation in 2005 where I couldn't use the sequencer because I couldn't simulate that space, so I had to go back to my original training and just hear this thing in my head. And so I was walking around Le Marais, you know, in the 4th arrondissement of Paris, just hearing the stuff in my head. And, you know, so, you know, I'd be walking, and I say, oh, yeah. And then I'd go back to the apartment, you know, write it down. back to basics. So everything was scored out completely. The problem with the musicians was that nobody could read music. Well, I would say like 90% of the people who showed up, there were talented amateurs that could play rock or but so I had to do the thing in verbal notation. So I wrote it out in music, and it can be decoded easily, but it was very, very specific what was played. Did I answer your question, GH? Yeah. But the thing is, playing in a space like that is a little bit like having the pedal down on the piano. You play, and so there's a lot of room for a grand mess. If you make a little mistake, it's not going to be heard. And that was sort of scored into the music also. And, a little bit, with all those white X's, with the images, it's kind of a little bit like putting the pedal down on the piano also, no? Joseph?
Isn't that like almost flocking behavior?
It's flocking. It actually reminded me of sperm more than I'd ever experienced it before. And I would have thought I would have seen that, but it was very spermy to me tonight. And I've seen the piece 100 or more times, and I've never had that experience before.
Well, yeah, I hadn't seen this particular version either. Yeah. And the colors were striking, and there was like more white.
There was more white than expected, or than anyway.
It seemed a lot like neural networks to me also, though. Rhys, just a little bit more about the 200 guitar thing that was here in New York. 2008, it wasn't able to happen because of weather, and then it happened the next year. The weather cooperated, but I read somewhere that it would have been able to happen even if the weather had been funky. So
yeah, we got it together after the first year. The first year we were rained out, and so the next year we put awnings over the guitarists so that if it did rain, the people wouldn't be electrocuted, if they plugged into their guitar, which was the situation the precedent year. But I had to completely rewrite the score for that space because the reverberation time was only 2 seconds.
And how did that all work with 200 people? I mean, where did you find them all, and how did you rehearse with them, and how did they get to, or was it
in New York? How many? I mean, who plays guitar here? Everyone? Hello? Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Right. And so, finding 200 guitarists was not difficult at all. We rehearsed in the Fashion Institute
of
Technology. Thank you. And the teachers were playing in it also, and it was really a gas. Yeah.
Do you guys have any upcoming collaboration from since this one, or?
This is going on into the world.
Great. So it'll mutate and morph and have these different permutations.
Well, we're sort of going into the brass area, aren't we, Joseph, a little bit? Our
Talk
last
more
piece
about
was,
that. Which body part?
Joseph.
That would probably be the ear hole.
But talk more about the brass.
Well, when we did it with the last time we played with a brass instrument and the Viral Symphony mixed into it, Joseph, it wasn't an ear hole that we were looking at for 20 minutes.
Right. Well, I'm just thinking hypothetically for the future.
Yeah.
What about the whole notion of, because I think this work does evoke it for me, this whole synesthetic kind of thing where sound bleeds into image and vice versa. Do you think about that at all with your work, either of you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I mean, I was developing the audio out of the visuals, so that's synesthesia by definition, but this just seemed to work on the emotional, spiritual level, like integrated. So I think that's actually more important than any technique or idea or procedure, you know. I mean, for me, it's about the emotion that's created and sort of the love that's felt or created from the fusion of these different inputs, you know. Well, I mean, again, it's sort of repetition with difference. I mean, I have a data bank of imagery that I've created that's similar but different than the other images, so there's a kind of vocabulary there, and then that can be sort of juxtaposed up against another chance-operated program of the audio, for example, and it's just a language, these two languages that come into contact. And so, you know, if you have a language, like each word doesn't necessarily mean it has to be in one place or the other. It's a common sort of experience.
You know, as we're looking, or at least as I was looking at the images this evening, because every time it changes for me, you know, I've seen this viral work many times, and every time it's different. And it's working on a lot of different levels, you know, in the sense of things are constantly changing, and you can look at different things and see different things and focus on different things. And in a similar way with a lot of my guitar work, starting from Guitar Trio, you know, from 1977, I was working with the overtone series that comes out of one note of the electric guitar E. And so you're hearing this one note, and okay, you know, so most punk bands play 3 chords. You know, this band is only playing 1 chord. And you can listen to it that way. But in addition to the one note, you're hearing this whole harmonic series. And with 3 guitars, or in the version that we're doing it now with 6 or 10 guitars, you hear this mesh of overtones. And so, of course, you're hearing this one note. But on top of it, you're hearing all these harmonics, which can be posited as singers. You know, for example, you're hearing them as like vocals, or you're hearing just all these shimmering things that are happening. And to use this same analogy, that it's sort of, you're hearing a melody, but it's not my melody, it's your melody. Because it's working on so many levels that you can pick out whatever you want to hear. And it depends on what your musical background is. You might hear a blues, you might hear a power chord progression, or depends on what your psychology is, really. And in a way, I think that correlates with you know, what we saw tonight, you know, with all these like shimmering things. And it's because of this ambiguity of the music that's saying something very, very specific, but at the same time very open. That
as
it
you
works
say,
with
it's the
what you're
same
doing,
with the visuals.
because it's similar. No?
Yes.
Bon. Voilà quoi.
D'accord.
Did I want to change something about the music in relation to what I was saying? My heart was just skipping every other beat, you know, the whole time I was looking at it. And I was saying, did I do this music? And the answer to that question, of course, no, I didn't. It was 200 guitarists who played it at Sacré-Coeur that did it. I didn't remember it, because I haven't listened to the recording for a long time, actually. But I was asking myself the questions that you guys have been asking. You know, why does it work with these particular images? You know, and I think that my response would be to what we were talking about, actually.
Right, the structure and yet the openness, and that each individual brings their own perspective, psychology, projections, whatever, and it has that.
Both the visual aspect and the music are open.
Mm-hmm.
And very inner.
Very inner, very interior. Yeah, it was like a meditation, something. Anybody else with any questions or comments? Anything else either of you two would like to say?
No, I just want to thank everyone for coming.
Yes, thank you all for coming. And
I want to thank Suzanne Anker and the BFA for the Fine Arts for sponsoring us.
definitely. And go visit the table over there if you have the...
Yes, if you have those, there's a book, the little book of collected essays called Towards an Immersive Intelligence, the CD that was produced with the viral noise that I discussed, Rhys's two CDs. So come on by.
And you don't have to buy anything. You can just come and talk with us.
Yeah.
But
and yes,
so please,
especially thanks
to
to
France, entrée libre.
But especially thanks to these two for offering us this experience here tonight with their collaboration.